So today I'm speaking about Vedic archaeology. The Vedas, of course, are the Sanskrit texts of ancient India, and I'm using the term Vedas to include the Puranas or the histories, which are sometimes called the fifth Veda, in addition to the four original Vedas, Rig, Sama, Artava, and Yajur. So by Vedic archaeology, I mean archaeology informed by the Vedic literature. And there are several topics that I think are of interest from this standpoint. The first is one that we just heard from Dr. Rita Yene about, which is the history of India for the past 5 or 10,000 years. For followers of the Vedic tradition, we often mention that, for example, Lord Krishna was present 5,000 years ago at the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where the Bhagavad Gita was spoken, and that that Krishna visited Vedic cities such as Mathura and Dwarka and others, but that is not part of the current dominant paradigm in archaeology and anthropology. We'll talk about each of these topics later on. Some of them I've investigated personally, others I know about, but would like to see further research done. So the second topic is one of those, the worldwide presence of Vedic culture. Any evidence for that would be welcome. The third topic is one that I've personally had some experience with, and that is Indigenous archaeology in India. The fourth topic that I find interesting is archaeoastronomy and exoarchaeology, and I'll be defining those terms in a moment when we get to that topic. And then the topic of extreme human antiquity, which I'm best known for. So, regarding the history of India for the past 5 to 10,000 years, the current dominant paradigm is that while there is no evidence for a specifically Vedic urban civilization within the bounds of the Indian subcontinent, there is the Indus Valley civilization, which dates back at least 5,000 years, and its main sites are listed there in this map. The cultural identity of the population of this civilization is not currently known. The language isn't known. We heard in the past uh, presentation by Dr. Yene that the script of this civilization hasn't been deciphered, so that would help. So, according to the current paradigm, uh, the specifically Sanskrit speaking or Vedic cultural elements entered the Indian subcontinent from the northwest, from the Indo-Iranian plateau, somewhat less than 5,000 years ago, about 3,500 years ago. So future discoveries may aid us in defining the cultural identity of the Indus civilization population, but in the absence of a decipherment of the script, other elements may contribute to our understanding of these things. This is the Indus Valley civilization site of Lothal, which is in present-day Gujarat state in northwestern India. The site dates back to 4,400 to 3,900 years ago. And I visited that site and did some research on the city planning aspect of it. Now, the Vedic civilization had a system of architecture and town planning called Vastu. And the planning for structures and settlements was based on a grid, a Vastu grid that is rectangular, actually square shaped, and the sides of the square are in the directions of the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. If we look at the site plan of Lothal, that was drawn up by the original discoverers of the site, we see that if we orient it towards the north, basically it conforms to a standard Vastu grid. But not only that, the streets are laid out going north, south, east, west. The buildings are oriented towards the north, south, east, and west. And the elements of the settlement conform to the Vastu principle that the activities related to the Vaishyas or the economic class, such as a warehouse for storing trade goods found in the southeastern area, the activities of the working class, the workshops for making beads and other objects used and traded by the civilization are concentrated in the southwestern area, which is, according to Vastu principles, the uh, spiritual activities, as indicated by fire altars, were discovered in the northern area, and the administrative or governmental buildings were located on the eastern side. Here, this again is according to Vastu principles. Also, the whole community is served by an elaborate system for eliminating wastewater and things like that. And the drainage system goes to the east, which is also according to Vastu principles. So, in the absence of a decipherment of the script, in addition to archaeological evidence, this type of evidence may also be helpful in identifying the culture of the population. The second topic that I think is of interest to persons interested in Vedic archaeology would be evidence for the worldwide presence of Vedic culture. Now, I haven't personally investigated this topic myself to any great detailed degree, but I have encountered many references to similarities between the architecture of, say, South India and Central America, civilizations like the Mayan civilization. So I think there is a lot of anecdotal and evidence for this, and it would be good for it to be investigated in a more scientific way that would take into account modern conceptions of how such similarities could arise. Archaeologists say there are different ways in which this could happen, one being simply by chance, which hardly seems likely, or by diffusion of ideas and concepts from one culture to another, or by actual migration of people with these concepts from one geographical location to another. A topic that I've explored in some depth is the presence of an indigenous archaeology tradition in India, apart from the concept of archaeology that was introduced into India by the Europeans, such as the British, especially during their time of colonial presence in India. And they organized the Archaeological Survey of India, which is continued under Indian uh, under the Indian government that took place, that took over when India became independent in 1948. So this indigenous tradition involves discoveries of lost sacred images and sacred places by saints using what we might call paranormal methods. For example, Rupa Goswami, a follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the 16th century, discovered the lost deity of Govindaji, and he did it by a vision. He was inspired in a vision to go to the location and conduct an excavation. So many of the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself were engaged in such archaeology in the sense of excavating lost sacred images and lost sacred places. Now, Rupa Goswami's Govindaji deity was originally housed in this temple, the Govindaji temple in Vrindavan, India. And if you go there today, it's no longer a functioning temple, but you can visit the place. And alongside the altar, there's a stairway that goes down into the ground. And there's a chamber in which the place where Rupa Goswami excavated the Govindaji deity is marked. And worshippers leave offerings there. Today, the Govindaji image or deity or murti is located in Jaipur in Rajasthan. I've published academic papers on this topic. For example, there's this paper, Excavating the Eternal, an Indigenous Archaeological Tradition in India, which was published in Antiquity, which is one of the main mainstream archaeology journals. And I've also pointed out that although the techniques used in this indigenous archaeological tradition seem alien to the Western scientific type of archaeology, in that, say, Rupa Goswami used visions and dreams to locate uh, uh, his discoveries. Something similar has gone on in modern science, although it's very little, not well known among today's scientists. For example, J.T. Robinson, who was a South African paleontologist who did uh, major research at the Sterkfontein caves in South Africa, finding fossil remains of Australopithecus, used a psychic in his work. This photograph shows Dr. Robinson in the Sterkfontein caves, and he recruited a psychic, Jeffrey Hudson, who he used to try to get information about fossils and artifacts he discovered. This psychic would go into trance in the cave, and Dr. Robinson would place a fossil or artifact on his forehead, and the psychic would envision the creature that was represented by the fossil acting millions of years ago. And uh, Robinson recorded these visions and used them to help interpret the fossils and artifacts he discovered. I presented a paper about this at a meeting of the World Archaeological Congress, and it was later published in an academic peer-reviewed publication. Another topic that I find interesting, in which I haven't done a whole lot of research about myself, is the topics of archaeoastronomy and exoarchaeology. First, we'll deal with archaeoastronomy. And that is the study of how archaeological objects and sites and structures may encode detailed astronomical information, indicating that whoever made and designed these artifacts or structures had high level of knowledge of astronomy. For example, I went to Angkor Wat, and what we see here is the front entrance to the temple complex. And it's constructed in such a way that on the summer solstice, the sun rises directly over the the left end of the front wall of the temple complex. And when the fall equinox comes, the sun rises over the central gate of the front wall of the temple complex. And then it moves to the winter solstice on the right hand, and then going back to the spring equinox and back to the summer solstice. So whoever designed this place and built it had a deep understanding of the movements of the sun throughout the course of the year. The temple complex also has wall carvings that depict the churning of the milk ocean, which is described in the Bhagavad Purana or Srimad Bhagavatam. The wall carving depicts the demons and the demigods churning the milk ocean using Mount Mandara as the churning rod, and the churning rod is resting on the back of the Kurma avatar, the incarnation of Krishna as a great tortoise. So on one side, they have have depicted all of the demons pulling on one end of the serpent Vasuki, who was used as the churning rope. And on the other side of this uh, stone relief, there are depicted the demigods pulling their end. And if you calculate the number of demons and the number of demigods, they correspond to the number of days from the equinox to the solstice. So this stone carving encodes detailed astronomical information. So this is something that archaeologists and astronomers and astrophysicists can possibly cooperate on, is detecting this kind of information encoded in archaeological structures and artifacts. So exoarchaeology is the second topic in this module, and that means the study of archaeological remains on off the earth. Actually, it's very surprising. Mainstream archaeologists at their professional conferences, such as meetings of the World Archaeological Congress, have had whole sessions on extraterrestrial archaeology. One of the things that they're considering is what do we have? What will happen when archaeologists go to the moon and start collecting objects that we've sent there? You know, according to the history, the United States sent several probes and manned missions to the moon and left artifacts there. So, whose museum will they go into? Who will own them? Archaeologists are discussing these things actively in their professional gatherings. They are also considering what will they do if they find artifacts or structures that we are not responsible for. In other words, archaeological remains left by human-like beings from other planets or other parts of the cosmos.
Michael, just
And
maybe 2 more minutes.
yes,
Thank you.
Avi Loeb, head of the astronomy department at Harvard University, has discussed this issue, and he's identified an object that recently entered our solar system as possibly a probe from another civilization outside the Earth. He did that in his book, Extraterrestrial, First Sign of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth. And finally, there is more research needed in the topic of extreme human antiquity. As my guru, Srila Prabhupada, mentioned, the Vedic histories, the Puranas and Mahabharata, relate human histories that extend millions of years into the past. So there are discoveries that are consistent with that. Sadhuputta, Dr. Richard L. Thompson, and I documented that evidence in our book, Forbidden Archaeology. And I've had some academic publications on this topic, such as this paper, Puranic Time in the Archaeological Record. So these are some of my books on this topic. And we have a special offer for a set of 5 of my books on this topic, and that's some contact information. So thank you very much, Kunal, for hosting me at this summer school talk on Vedic archaeology.